We're starting with Joanne Rowling in Edinburgh. This is the mid-1990s.
And the challenge here was it was massive. You have to put yourself in that context. She's a single mother. She's reliant on state support, navigating this perpetual financial stress.
And on top of all that, there's the deep, just bone-wearying exhaustion that comes from having a young child. That 24/7 reality.
Right, so she has the entire Harry Potter series mapped out in her head, but she lacks the one thing that we all think is essential for deep creative work.
The perfect conditions, the quiet room, the uninterrupted time.
Exactly. Her home life was, by necessity, defined by urgent, high-friction tasks. Childcare, feeding, errands, just the mental load of worrying. The negotiation with her exhausted brain was constant. You're too drained. Just rest. You can't focus anyway.
But she made this move that was so profoundly simple yet, I guess geographically powerful is the right way to put it.
It is. She changed the setting. She didn't find time or energy. She couldn't. Instead, she strategically borrowed a protective environment.
And she did this by pushing her baby, Jessica, in the pram to different cafes around Edinburgh, and she would write while Jessica slept.
And that specific detail, the pram and the cafe, that's the operational key here. It wasn't about waiting for some bolt of inspiration to strike.
No, it was about honoring a very specific, defined, protected time window.
That's it. She knew when the baby was asleep. She knew the location was warm and stable enough for her to sit still for a bit. She used the cafe as a very deliberate system for getting words on the page.
It sounds like a great solution for some, but I can't help but wonder. That low-level noise that worked for her might be intensely distracting for someone else. We always hear that you need quiet, total solitude for real inspiration. Did the sources suggest anything about varying tolerances for that kind of background buzz?
That's a really crucial question, and it gets to the heart of the distinction between two different kinds of work. The sources really suggest that a cafe environment, or any third place really, it isn't built for generating, say, radical new ideas from scratch.
Okay, so not for solving a complex math problem.
Exactly. That often demands deep solitude. The cafe is built for something else. It's built for low-friction continuity and for editing. Remember, Rowling had the entire sprawling plot already mapped out. Her evening work wasn't brainstorming.
Yeah, it was labor.
It was the relentless, incremental labor of translation, moving the map from her head onto the page, sentence by sentence.
So the cafe wasn't the muse. It was a reliable machine for output. It was a system that just made it easier to keep going.
Precisely. And that background noise, far from being a distraction, it actually provided a kind of shield. It's just enough ambient sound, a slight cognitive distraction, that it acts like a blanket.
A blanket. How so?
It allowed her to drown out her internal critic, which is so often louder and more destructive than any external distraction. And this is vital for the tired brain because it's too exhausted to fight that inner editor who's telling you everything you write is terrible.
And we shouldn't forget the more practical benefits too, right? The financial and social ones.
Absolutely. Beyond the free heat, which was a real factor, and the low-level hum, the cafe provided what we could call social friction or a public pressure.
Okay, explain that. Social friction.
Well, once you've committed the effort, you've pushed the pram there, you've bought your tea, you've set up your notebook, the friction to just pack up and leave with nothing done is suddenly much higher than the friction to just keep going.
Right. The act of exiting a public space without a result, it forces a kind of self-accountability.
It does. The task shrinks to something tolerable. Just push the story forward by a few inches. She needed continuation, not a miracle.
And those ordinary low-friction cafe hours, they eventually compound into one of the most successful book series in history. It just completely rewrites the script on what productivity is supposed to look like.
And the core lesson here is environment design.
Yes. Home is, in a way, a dangerous, high-friction place for a tired worker because it's full of these invisible triggers. The couch, the sink full of dishes, the TV remote.
A tired brain will always, always follow the path of least resistance. So Rowling used the cafe as a third place. It's not home, it's not formal work, but it's a setting built specifically for staying awake and focusing on one thing. It prevents that cognitive drift that exhaustion just loves.
This connects directly to a known scientific concept, doesn't it? Attention restoration theory, or RT. Can you break down why that small change of scenery has such an oversized cognitive effect?
I can, yeah. Art suggests that our directed attention, that's the deep focus required for complex tasks, it gets fatigued. After a full day of work, meetings, decisions, it's just worn out.
They call that directed attention fatigue.
Right. And our type posits that we can restore this attention by engaging in what they call soft fascination, which is just non-demanding sensory input.
Like watching leaves rustle in the wind or a gentle stream flowing.
Precisely. And in the city, the soft fascination comes from, watching the gentle ebb and flow of people, listening to quiet conversations you don't have to participate in, seeing the traffic outside the window.
So it's passive?
It's passive input. It allows the executive function to briefly rest and recharge just enough to handle, say, 30 minutes of low-stakes writing. It's a physical and a mental shift that signals to the brain, this is a new mode. You are not at home. You are here to do one thing.
That makes the actionable strategy for you listening right now crystal clear. If your home is full of friction, your strategy is to create a third-place menu for yourself.
Right, a library reading room, a quiet corporate lobby after hours, maybe even a park bench if the weather allows. And you have to build a little carry kit, a bag that's always ready so your setup time is under a minute.
And you have to use an if-then departure rule. This is crucial. You're pre-committing the behavior to a geographical cue.
If dinner ends, then I immediately leave for 40 minutes of work at the library. You are treating evening productivity as a geography problem, not a willpower problem.
The goal is just arrival plus start, not perfection.
When home makes quitting easy, you borrow a room that makes starting inevitable.
That concept, the idea of deliberately using constraint, it brings us seamlessly to our next figure, who used maybe the most unlikely setting bureaucracy to achieve breakthrough work.
Albert Einstein.
Albert Einstein.
Right. So we're transitioning across Europe to Bern, Switzerland, around 1902. Einstein can't get an academic post, so he accepts this stable but very constrained job at the Federal Office for Intellectual Property.
A patent clerk.
A patent clerk. 8 hours a day of incredibly precise, focused, often monotonous bureaucratic work. It is the exact opposite of the bohemian freedom we imagine a genius needs.
But the paradox is just so profound. He later called the patent office a worldly secular cloister where he hatched his most beautiful ideas.
And we have to remember, this is the environment where he developed the Annus Mirabilis papers, the papers on the photoelectric effect, Brownian motion, special relativity, all published in 1905 while he was still working that job.
That phrase, secular cloister, it's gold because it defines the power of chosen constraint, the power of boundaries.
Absolutely. Einstein didn't have unlimited free time or this huge surge of energy after a full day of bureaucratic labor. He was married, he was raising a family, he was grinding through life like everyone else.
But the office provided boundaries against that vague, overwhelming ambition that can paralyze you.
It gave him a specific time window, a specific quiet place, and rules that prevented the cognitive drift that chaos invites. A cloister is, by definition, quiet, bounded, and protected.
So he didn't win by having some huge reservoir of energy. He won by having a dedicated container, a container that made deep, focused work possible even when his life was full and his overall energy was low.
And this is so essential for the tired brain. Fatigue narrows your attention, it increases your distractibility, and it makes it way harder to hold complex threads in your mind.
So if your evening plan is just vaguely, do deep work whenever inspiration strikes.
The tired brain will veto it every single time. The cloister offers a better path, one defined task in a defined box, leading to progress that you can realistically finish.
But if the whole point of creative work is freedom, doesn't that kind of constraint choke off serendipity? I mean, how do we use this cloister idea without becoming rigid and just burning out?
That's the subtlety of this kind of strategic constraint, isn't it? A constraint isn't meant to dictate what you think about. It's about when and where you think about it.
Okay.
For Einstein, the bureaucratic job itself forced him to work on his revolutionary ideas only during these clearly bounded intervals on the commute, during a fixed lunch break, or in the evening. This forced focus meant that when he did sit down to work, he wasn't spending 30 minutes deciding what to do.
He jumped straight in.
He jumped straight into a pre-chosen problem. The walls of the container focused his energy.
This sounds like the structural foundation for tools we see all the time in modern productivity systems, things like time boxing and bounding.
It's the exact same principle.
Yeah.
We have studies comparing different structured work intervals, like the Pomodoro technique, 25 minutes on, 5 minutes off.
For 40-10, 50-10.
Right. And the key finding isn't that one specific ratio is magical. It's that structured intervals and deliberate bounded breaks make sustained effort manageable. They are the walls you build around the work, preventing that open-ended commitment that just exhausts the brain.
So if your default tired habit is this open-ended work that just leads to guilt and quitting.
The cloister habit is a specific, doable output in a fixed time box.
So the actionable tactics for the listener here. One is creating a nightly cloister box, maybe 30 to 60 minutes.
Yes, and the consistent start time and place is critical. It has to be short enough to be non-negotiable, but long enough to actually yield some meaningful output.
And defining that single output is so key for that low-energy brain. Don't say, I'll make progress on the project.
No, you have to be specific. Say, I will draft the executive summary of 1 page, or I will outline the 3 critical arguments for the presentation. It needs to be something that can be done within the constraint. That allows for closure.
And tying back to the geography solution, you use that powerful if-then-start trigger for consistency.
If I turn off the kitchen light, then I start the first 10 minutes of my cloister task in the den. And here's a pro tip from writers who use these structured sessions. End with an immediate next entry.
What do you mean by that?
You stop mid-sentence on purpose. You leave a note for your future self about tomorrow's first move. That's momentum insurance. Give your tired evenings a cloister. Small walls, quiet focus, and finished work.
Okay, so we've moved from the geography of work to the actual act of initiating it. How do you start when the activation energy feels impossibly high? Our next failure understood that the next step had to be so tiny, so non-threatening, that tiredness just couldn't logically argue against it.
Sarah Blakely.
Sarah Blakely.
Blakely's origin story, before Spanx became this billion-dollar empire, it's a perfect illustration of evening productivity through constraint. She was selling fax machines door-to-door in Atlanta in the late 1990s.
And let's be clear, that is a grinding, exhausting, high-rejection day job.
She was physically and emotionally drained every single evening. But she reserved those low-energy hours for developing the Spanx idea.
And her process was anything but glamorous, right? It was very tactical. She wasn't holding fashion shows in her apartment.
No, she was researching fabric types. She was looking into patents and trademarks. She often spent her nights at the Georgia Tech Library, relying on her, $5,000 in savings?
She was continuing and not crushing it. That's a key distinction. She was performing low-stakes administrative research, which is exactly the kind of work the tired brain can handle.
And the critical insight here is just one word: shrinkage. You have to shrink the work. When your brain is loud with excuses, you're tired. You need to relax. This is too hard. The only way forward is to make the next step so small that the veto power is removed.
Evening productivity is about moving the idea forward by inches. It's about guaranteeing progress, not demanding perfection.
Exactly. And we need to anchor this in the science of why the evening brain is so prone to making excuses.
Right, there's a biological reason for this.
Yes. There is extensive research on circadian rhythms and cognitive performance, and it demonstrates that mental energy, especially for functions like planning, self-control, and directed attention, it just naturally dips in the evening. This is a physiological reality.
So if your whole productivity system demands high motivation and pristine focus after dinner,
It's structurally unsound. It is going to fail. You cannot rely on willpower when the tank is literally empty.
so the entire approach has to shift. We have to stop demanding willpower and start prioritizing the reduction of micro-decisions. We have to dramatically lower the activation energy of just starting.
Which brings us back to that incredibly powerful, well-researched tool, Implementation Intentions Revisited.
We've touched on this before, but let's really elaborate on why this simple structure is such a game changer for the tired brain.
Because it completely bypasses the need for debate in the moment. The American Psychological Association, among others, emphasizes that these simple if-then plans are highly effective for planning for situations like exhaustion that are likely to derail your goals.
You pre-decide the behavior when you're mentally fresh.
Exactly. The brain requires far less energy to just follow a pre-written script than it does to make a new decision from scratch. The structure is non-negotiable. If I and you insert your evening cue, then I insert your 10-minute task.
So instead of a vague goal like I need to work on the quarterly presentation, you have to define the tiny win.
A tiny win. It's a commitment of just 5 to 15 minutes of low-friction output. It has to be one micro task that meaningfully moves tomorrow forward.
So for an administrative worker, that might be something like clean one inbox and archive 50 emails.
Perfect. For a student, outline the first 3 bullets of the conclusion. For a creative person, draft 1 paragraph of dialogue. Blakely used her evenings to research one tiny aspect of the patent process or read 1 article on hosiery.
And pre-staging the work is paramount because the friction of just finding things can derail the whole system.
Oh, absolutely. If you have to find the document, locate the power cord, boot up the computer, and clear off the table, Your tired brain will register, I don't know, 20 micro obstacles and just quit before you start.
You have to leave the next step fully open. The notebook on the table with the pen placed on the page, the relevant document loaded on the screen. Make the start instantaneous.
So the ultimate goal isn't volume, it's consistency. You promise yourself only 10 minutes, and you track showing up. Put a physical X on the calendar every time you honor that commitment, even if you stop at exactly 10 minutes.
When you're tired, you don't demand brilliance. You just demand a next small step.
And that concept, the idea of relying on process, not memory, when you're under duress, it leads us perfectly to our most extreme anecdote.
U.S. Airways Flight 1549, The Miracle on the Hudson.
A remarkable analogy because it's all about cognitive performance under extreme duress. And the tired evening is simply a lower-grade, mundane form of that same duress.
Right, so January 2009, low-altitude emergency, bird strike, dual engine failure. The clock is ticking in a way few of us will ever experience.
And fatigue, even with professional training, is severely challenged in that moment. And what did Captain Sullenberger and First Officer Jeffrey Skills do? They didn't rely on their vast professional memory alone.
No, the co-pilot ran the engine dual failure checklist from the Quick Reference Handbook.
The immediate, rational human response to immense pressure or chronic, intense tiredness is the narrowing of attention and the fragility of short-term memory. You have to offload steps onto paper.
The physician and writer Atul Gawande has a great term for this. He calls the checklist a cognitive net.
That's a perfect description. It's not about mistrusting your competence. It's about recognizing that memory and attention are fragile under any kind of strain. When your brain is depleted by the day, your mental performance is impaired. The checklist handles the necessary repeatable steps, which frees up your limited energy for complex judgment.
We can make an explicit link here then. Both high-stakes emergencies and chronic fatigue, they narrow our attention. They deplete the brain's reserves.
The cognitive mechanism is quite similar. The ability to hold multiple steps in your mind, to recall non-routine procedures, to inhibit irrelevant thoughts, it degrades severely. The principle is the separation of control and procedure.
So Sully handled the high judgment work, the control of the aircraft, the communication. The co-pilot handled the procedure from the checklist.
For you, the listener, this means your tired self handles the creative work, the control, but the checklist handles the rote mechanics of starting, running, and finishing the session, the procedure.
What's so instructive is that even the Flight 1549 checklist didn't perfectly match the low-altitude scenario they were in.
But the act of having a process, of following a structured sequence, it drastically reduced the mental load. It provided a framework to follow when complexity just spiked. That is the actionable lesson.
So we need to create a short, maybe 7-line maximum, tired evening checklist, something externalized and ready to go.
Absolutely. And it must use clear verbs, not intentions. Don't write, work on the memo.
No, you have to write, open memo doc, check source links, add 3 bullets, save. Write tomorrow's first sentence.
So it has to be a rote sequence you can execute when you are running at 30% energy.
And I love the idea of building in a do-confirm split into this. So you do the work, then you confirm the critical essentials.
Yes. Did I send it? Did I save it to the cloud? Did I schedule the follow-up? Did I stage tomorrow's materials? And crucially, you have to define a minimum viable fallback.
A plan for the really bad nights.
For the nights when you are truly mentally crushed, you have a 2-step checklist. 1, set tomorrow's first task. And 2, set the environment. That's it. When your energy drops, move your entire plan onto paper, then just follow it like a seasoned professional pilot.
Okay, so far we've covered where to work, that's geography, and how to start, which is shrinking the step. But what about the crucial final piece? How do you stop working when you're tired in a way that actually helps you win tomorrow?
This is where Benjamin Franklin comes in, the original productivity maven, with his absolute focus on strategic shutdown.
Franklin was operating in early Philadelphia, and he had an extraordinarily complicated life. He was a printer, an inventor, a civic leader, a statesman.
Just doing everything. And he recognized that trying to do everything leads to carrying unfinished business into bed.
Yeah.
What we now call open cognitive loops. This mental residue is the definition of a failed evening, and it guarantees a poor morning.
His famous daily schedule was so meticulous, but the enduring genius is in the nightly ritual. He had this closing routine.
He called it, put things in their places. And that was followed by supper, conversation, and then critically, an examination of the day.
And the central feature of that examination was a single question he asked himself every night.
What good have I done today?
That question is so profound because it forces definitive closure. It turns the day into a finished chapter rather than something you just sort of abandon because you were exhausted.
It makes you acknowledge incremental progress, which is so restorative for a tired brain that feels like it got nothing done.
This isn't just about accountability either. This is systems thinking from the 18th century. It relates directly to his famous maxim, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure.
It does. And while he originally applied that to fire safety in Philadelphia, the psychological application here is unmistakable.
So break that down. How does that apply to the tired evening?
Well, most of us treat tired nights as leftover time, and we use that leftover time to postpone preparation for the next day. So we pay the pound of cure tax the next morning.
Rushing, forgetting things, feeling overwhelmed, starting the day already behind.
Exactly. Franklin used the tired evening, when his decision-making capacity was low, to execute these low-friction preventative steps. The goal shifts from trying to do more tonight to simply setting up next for tomorrow.
So that closing ritual, it captures two massive wins for the tired worker. First, put things in their places. That reduces tomorrow's microstressors. A tidy environment means less friction, less visual clutter, which directly reduces your cognitive load.
And second, the reflection creates a hard mental ending. The examination of the day turns that vague guilt you feel into specific knowledge of what was actually accomplished and what needs to happen next.
And this is exactly why the evening is such a terrible time for complex decisions. Your cognitive performance is low.
So the evening win is a closing ritual that reduces the number of decisions you'll face tomorrow, that decreases the friction for your first work block, and clears out that mental residue so you can actually rest.
So for you, the listener, this means institutionalizing a 10-minute Franklin reset.
You commit to it, putting tools away, clearing one surface, and setting out what you'll need first thing tomorrow. It's a deliberate, physical signal that the workday is ending.
And instead of writing a full, overwhelming to-do list, which the tired brain will just look at and ignore,
You write a tomorrow starter. Just one single sentence defining the first physical task. You lock it in with an if-then rule. If I sit down at my desk, then I will open the client email and outline the first 3 talking points for 15 minutes.
and you end with that 2-line examination, what I did well today and what I'll do differently tomorrow. That forces closure and it promotes learning.
You're using the tired evening to buy yourself an easy, productive morning. And buying that easy morning often involves making the ultimate strategic choice the tired brain needs to consider,
Which is?
knowing when to surrender the fight altogether and just go to sleep.
This brings us to a really powerful modern anecdote. Arianna Huffington's dramatic collapse in 2007. This was the unavoidable physical consequence of treating exhaustion as a status symbol.
The always-on hustle culture.
Right. Until her body literally made the decision for her. She collapsed, broke her cheekbone, all from burnout and sleep deprivation.
And this is the ultimate cautionary tale that proves the body eventually overrules the calendar. Huffington's experience forces us to reframe evening work entirely. She realized, and now she strongly advocates, that the most productive late-night move is sometimes the deliberate, strategic choice to just go to sleep.
She started treating sleep not as an indulgence you sneak in, but as a critical, non-negotiable performance tool.
And the science backs her up completely. The sources are clear. Sleep loss reliably degrades alertness, performance, reaction time, and crucially for our topic, higher-order cognition.
So if your evening work steals from tomorrow's focus, or your decision-making quality, or your alertness, it's a net loss.
The point of productivity is performance, not punishment. The tired evening tries to sell us 2 cognitive lies.
Okay, what are they?
Lie number 1, if I just squeeze in more work now, I'll get ahead. Lie number 2, if I keep scrolling on my phone, I'll recover. Both are usually false, and they actively steal from tomorrow's reserves.
So your evening productivity system should be judged solely by the quality of your tomorrow morning.
That's the metric. If tomorrow starts clearer, calmer, and faster, then last night's choices worked, regardless of the quantity of work you actually got done.
This emphasizes the logic behind the structured shutdown. Cal Newport popularized this concept.
Yes, a shutdown ritual. It's a short, ritualistic sequence designed to close all those open cognitive loops we talked about. This allows the brain to actually stop thinking about work without the fear of forgetting something vital.
You have to review all open loops, tasks, worries, errands, outstanding emails, and capture them. Get them out of your head.
Write them down on paper or in a trusted system. By externalizing it, you offload the cognitive load. And this doesn't take long. 5 minutes is usually sufficient to stop those loops from spinning in your head while you're trying to rest.
And we need to implement strategic boundaries, which Huffington began advocating for so strongly. Things like cutting off caffeine around 2 p.m., not 5 p.m.
And stopping devices about 30 to 60 minutes before bed. That boundary is so critical because the blue light from screens actively suppresses melatonin production, which is your body's natural signal to sleep.
You need a deliberate, low-stimulus runway to sleep.
So the 5-minute shutdown ritual should be immediately followed by creating a tomorrow launchpad. Lay out the one thing that makes your morning frictionless: your notes, your packed bag, your clothes. And then you use sleep as a strategic performance choice. The best tired evening productivity hack is simply waking up sharp.
Okay, let's bring all of this together for you, the learner. The core insight we've uncovered, I think, through all of these varied sources is that achieving evening productivity, it's not about forcing discipline. It's not about trying to be tougher.
No, it's achieved entirely by ruthlessly minimizing friction and maximizing clarity.
We've identified 3 pillars for working successfully while you're tired. First, the solution of geography.
That's Relling and Einstein. Use place, environment, and structured constraint to remove the friction of being at home.
Second, the solution of micro-commitment.
That's Blakely and the checklists. You shrink the start, and you externalize the steps to bypass your depleted willpower.
And third, the solution of strategic closure.
Franklin and Huffington. You engineered tomorrow tonight by running a comprehensive shutdown ritual and, when you need to, prioritizing restoration.
And remember, you are judged, at the end of the day, by the quality of tomorrow, not the quantity of foggy work you squeezed in tonight. If you sacrifice clarity and focus tomorrow for an hour of low-quality work tonight, you lost the trade.
When we look at all these highly successful figures, we see this pattern that really runs counter to the modern myth of hustle till you drop. Rowling borrowed a tiny, clattering cafe. Einstein relied on a constrained, patterned office schedule. Franklin succeeded through scheduled, strict boundaries.
They found freedom within limits.
They did, which raises the final provocative question for you to consider as you wrap up your day.
In a world where we are always on, where the technical capability exists to work anywhere at any time, we often assume productivity requires total freedom and limitless space.
But is the ultimate system for productivity actually the self-imposed boundary?
The small, non-negotiable wall, the borrowed room, the planned, structured stop.
The very things that force us to focus deeply in a short burst, and maybe more importantly, ensure we are rested enough to succeed tomorrow morning.
So reflect on where you need to create your own secular cloister or your own third place or that tiny win commitment tonight.
Where can you deliberately reduce friction?